Hey, how are you guys? If it's not too much trouble, please rate the new voice in my community. Don't forget to leave a review and enjoy the story. Enjoy watching. The story begins. MC combed his hair, he straightened his shirt, he looked at himself in the mirror, and said, "Perfect." After all, starting today, he would begin his duties as a court blacksmith. He left the house. He thought about how much effort he had put into fulfilling his dream of becoming the best blacksmith in the world. He walked down the street with a smile on his face. Cherry blossom leaves were falling near the castle grounds. He noticed the tree and saw that the cherry blossoms were in full bloom. The petals seemed to be greeting him. He decided that he would do his best to prove himself worthy. On his way to the smithy, he noticed a girl. This lovely stranger was enjoying the cherry blossoms. She approaches the MC and asks if he is a blacksmith. Fake was stunned that she spoke to him. He noticed that she was very cute. He thinks that this girl might be an aristocrat. He smiles and replies that he is a blacksmith and asks how she knew. Alicia giggles. He pointed to his pocket from which his blacksmith's license was sticking out. Fake noticed this and realized that he had almost lost it. Without this license, he would not be able to work. He thanked the young lady. Alicia replied that he was too young to be a blacksmith and asked how long he had been there. Fake stood at attention and declared that he would begin his duties today. Then he introduced himself. He noticed her surprised reaction and apologized, saying that he was just rehearsing. Alicia said that it was no big deal and that he was a very polite young man. She introduced herself as Alicia Burnest. Fake bowed and asked if she was an aristocrat. She answered in the affirmative but said there was no need for formalities. They continued to stand under the falling cherry blossom petals. Fake asked how she ended up here. Alicia explained that she was supposed to attend the ball, but many suitors were seeking her attention. So she had to escape. She asked him what he wanted to be. MC asked again. Alicia replied that she wasn't sure about herself and didn't know what her true desires were, but she really wanted to find out. Fake thought about what he really wanted and who he wanted to become. And at that moment, he said that he wanted to become the best blacksmith in the world. Alicia was surprised and asked, "The best in the world, really?" MC replied yes, he understands that it will not be easy, but he will do his best. He looked at him with sincere, shining eyes, and she whispered that perhaps it would be so. Then she confirmed her words by saying that she hoped he would become the best blacksmith in the world. Fake smiled and replied, "Of course." He clearly did not expect such open support from her. Fake took his leave and remembered how people used to laugh at him when he talked about his desires and dreams. Besides, he thought Alicia was very nice, and now that he would be serving at court, he would probably meet many charming people. Maybe one day he would even get married. He approached the smithy doors and exhaled nervously, and he remembered that first impressions are very important. He opened the door and shouted, "Good morning." At that very moment, he received a strong blow to the face. A bearded man threatened him with his fist and said, "Come on, get to work." He grabbed him by the shirt and ordered him to get to work immediately. Morgan gave him his first task, to restore a sword, and told him not to dare leave until he was finished. And so, the colorful life at court that he had imagined for himself was practically destroyed, and so began his personal hell. 3 years have passed since he took up his duties as a court blacksmith. His main responsibility was to restore weapons. He used to be a blacksmith in a village, but his talent was soon noticed, and that's how he ended up at court. Fake was full of hope to improve his craft in the place of his dreams, but the reality turned out to be completely different. Owner of the forge, Mr. Morgan, constantly yelled at him, telling Fake not to slow down in performing his duties. MC only had the courage to apologize to him. Morgan did not accept his apologies, saying that they were useless and that Fake was a failure, and that he would deduct this mistake from his monthly salary. Morgan asked if there were any problems. Fake replied that there were none and that he did not dare to argue. MC said that usually an entire workshop worked with such a large amount of ammunition, but now everything had been placed on his shoulders alone. And once again, he's being punished for a fabricated altercation with a colleague. Morgan hits MC in the face again. He declares that he will try to teach him some sense. Fake has been in this forge for 3 years, and people are constantly angry with him, but he has grown accustomed to the pain. He believes that his colleagues are right, and that he is not yet ready to join the workshop. He still lacks the necessary skills. That is why they are dissatisfied with him and constantly beat him. That's why his salary is lower and he has no days off. But MC believes that it's all his fault. He is to blame for this and is untalented. Morgan approached him with a smile and asked if Fake had thought about his behavior. If so, he asked him to get up and said that all weapons must be ready for the holidays. MC said he understood everything. Morgan replied that he and his colleagues had been invited to the ball, which is why Fake should not slack off and must do his job properly. His colleagues were leaving. One of them smiled and said that they hadn't visited the lovely Alicia in a long time. Then he shared the news that guests from a neighboring state would be joining them at the feast. It was necessary to greet the lady properly. Fake listened to all this silently and sadly. Then he closed the doors of the forge and went to work. Saw that he had a lot of work to do and realized that if he didn't finish by the end of the week, he would have to work night shifts. Tomorrow and the day after tomorrow were supposed to be his days off, and it would be nice to take a little break. But first, he needed to finish the weapons so he could deliver them to the knights, so he would have to put off his rest. And even if he finished by Monday, it would already be a new work week. He needed at least 1 day off, because he couldn't go on like this. MC thought that if he weren't so untalented, he would have finished much earlier. He applied a magical inlay to another weapon, and he explained that blacksmiths have 2 main responsibilities. The first is to make weapons, and the second is to cast spells. Enchantment increases the sharpness and durability of the sword. Thanks to this, the sword does not require additional maintenance and does not rust, which is also a magical effect. But the enchantment lasts about a week. Therefore, every week, many weapons are brought to the smithy. Enchanting is not a complicated process. First, you need to familiarize yourself with the contents of the weapon's magic code. To do this, open a special system window. Corrections are made using magical power. Enchanting is done by changing or adding magical symbols. If you handle the weapon carelessly or do not restore it for too long, the symbols will wear off. If the spells on the sword are still intact, all you need to do is renew them. If they have completely disappeared, you will need to reapply them. He made a small number, exhaled, made a few more, and exhaled again. Then he moved on to the next sword. But his eyes closed, he smelled a pleasant aroma and felt something soft and warm. A woman's hand rested on his forehead. He didn't understand what was happening. Had he fallen asleep, MC jumped up with the words, "What bad luck." Now he won't be able to finish the job, and accidentally hit Lady Alicia standing above him. He grabbed her head and said it hurt. Fake was surprised to see her there. He bowed and said he was very sorry. Alicia replied that there was no need to apologize. MC said he had been disrespectful to the Duchess. Alicia was embarrassed and said no. Fake wondered why Lady Alicia was interested in blacksmithing, because every time she received an invitation to the ball, she came to the smithy. And just yesterday, Mr. Morgan had discussed with the others that Alicia had also been invited. MC thought about how he hadn't even changed his clothes, but remained in his work clothes and hadn't taken a bath. Alicia asked what had happened. She said that if he slept on the floor, he would catch a cold. Then she asked if everything was all right. Fake replied that he was fine, but what worried him most was that it was already morning and the ball was over, most likely. Alicia had stayed overnight and decided to stop by the forge before leaving. He remembered that he was supposed to finish his work yesterday, and it seemed to him that he had done everything that was required. Alicia looked at him and said he looked pale. She asked if he was feeling well and inquired about his health. Then she touched the abrasion on his face. Fake cried out in pain and said that everything was fine. And then he thought about how Mr. Morgan's blows usually didn't leave any bruises, and his behavior yesterday must have upset him. Thought about how nothing good awaited him. Alicia looked at MC with sympathy. She knows he's being mocked, but he did not want to admit it. After all, he liked her, even though he understood that he was not good enough for her. He couldn't win her over even if he tried his hardest, but at the same time, he wanted to look good in her eyes, and he didn't want her to see him looking so pathetic. MC wanted to make a good impression on her as a man. Alicia asked if he was in pain. She regretted not having any healing ointment. Fake asked her not to worry about it. He apologized and said he still had a lot of work to do and didn't have time to offer her tea. Alicia replied that he shouldn't worry about it and asked to watch him work. Fake replied that he didn't mind. He placed the sword on the table and began to enchant it. MC noticed that the sword was missing a symbol, and then the marks on the sword disappeared. Alicia watched his work closely and approached and said that he was very skilled and meticulous in his craft. Fake asked if she really thought so. The Duchess noticed a lot of weapons and asked if he had enchanted them all himself. She then assumed that this was the case. She said that it must not be easy and asked if all blacksmiths worked that way. Fake replied that they did because he was at the lowest level, and if he couldn't even handle that, he could forget about his dream of becoming the best craftsman. Alicia was surprised and replied that she didn't know that the path of a blacksmith was so thorny. His work clearly deserves respect, as befits a court armorer. MC replied sadly that there was nothing special about it because he still lacked experience. At that moment, Alicia took his hand. She said that he was an extremely remarkable person because he was capable of doing so much on his own. Fake replied that this was not the case. After all, according to others, he was just a mediocre talent. Understood that he had to keep up appearances in front of Alicia, but tears began to roll down his cheeks. She said his name and Fake asked what was wrong. He covered his face with his hand, wiping away his tears, and said that everything was fine. Alicia asked him to tell her what had happened. She hugged him tightly and asked him to share it with her, and if he didn't tell her, she wouldn't let him go. MC said that they weren't tears of grief, he was just washing his eyes. Alicia objected, saying that most people don't cry at all. Fake said that blacksmiths are just skilled in water magic. She looked him straight in the eyes and shouted again, asking him to tell her what had happened. He was ashamed, but he still told her what had happened. Once he started, he couldn't stop, even though he had never shared this with anyone before. But Lady Alicia is the daughter of the Duke. Does he have the right to behave like this in her presence? Is this acceptable? He justified his colleagues by saying that it was his own fault because he had no talent. We're just trying to teach him. Alicia reassured him, saying that it was all nonsense. Alicia apologized, saying she should have asked about it earlier. She put her hand on his head. Fake felt the warmth of her palm. A tear began to roll down his cheek. He said he should apologize because he had talked too much. MC realized that tears were flowing again and he didn't want her to see him looking so pathetic. At that moment, Argos burst into the forge and shouted, "You talentless hack, quickly enchant the sword." Alicia was surprised by his appearance and called him by name. Argos was taken aback by the situation. Alicia said that Argos's work would be blessed. Argos scratched the back of his head, came closer, and said that he didn't know Alicia was in the smithy. Fake understood that under normal circumstances, he would have been beaten up, but this time it was different. He assumed it was all because of the Duchess. Argos asked again to enchant the sword. This time more respectfully. Fake apologized and replied, of course. He took the sword in his hands and read its code, from which he understood that the sword had been used very recklessly. After all, he had cast a spell on it just a couple of days ago, but it was almost destroyed. Fake asked Mr. Argos to be more careful in the future. After all, the spell was significantly damaged. Argos clicked his tongue and declared that it was all the fault of the incompetent Fake, since he was the one who had cast the spell on the sword. Alicia watched his speech with interest. He apologized and asked to cast a stronger spell. Fake replied that she had cast a powerful enough spell, but the material used to make simple night swords was not of the best quality. Because of this, the spell's power was limited, and if you got carried away in battle, the magical structure would be broken. Argos clicked his tongue again, not wanting to listen to all this boring stuff. MC announced that the restoration of the sword was complete. The sword was in good condition and ready for use. Argos took it and examined it carefully. Then he headed for the exit, but before leaving the forge, he turned to Alicia. He suggested that she accompany him on a stroll to show her the palace surroundings. Alicia thanked him and replied that she had to decline, wishing him all the best. Argos then asked to take his leave. Alicia asked MC how often he encountered such behavior. Nick hesitated and thought about how he was once again pathetic and unable to maintain his dignity in the presence of a girl he liked. The Duchess asked him not to stress so much, otherwise he would ruin his health. Fake sadly stated that if he couldn't handle the work at court, he wouldn't be able to work anywhere else. Alicia asked why. MC explained that in that case, he would lose his license. To be honest, he had already tried to leave after working for a year. Told Mr. Morgan that he couldn't do it anymore and asked to be dismissed. But Mr. Morgan threatened that in that case, he would revoke his blacksmith's license. And without a license, he would not be able to practice his craft. Even if he continued to work secretly, if he was discovered, he could be arrested for illegal activity. Alicia took his hands. She said she had come to him for a reason and wanted to make him an offer. She said, well, with some embarrassment. And then she asked why they shouldn't get married. Fake was surprised by these words. He thought he must have misheard. He assumed that the Duchess simply meant something else by the word marriage. Alicia said marry again. Fake exclaimed, marriage, is that what he thinks it means, when a man and a woman live together? Alicia pressed his hands to her chest, clearly expressing her agreement with these words, but MC still didn't understand what was going on. Fake asked, marriage. Alicia said that he had understood her in that sense and that she didn't mean anything like that. She explained that many suitors were trying to win her hand in marriage, but she didn't want to marry any of them, so she needed MC as a cover. Alicia said that he was a blacksmith, just like her father. That's why she would be able to convince him. Convince whom? Asked MC. He wanted to know what she meant. Duchess explained that her family were blacksmiths, and her ancestors had presented the king with a sword, which is now considered a national treasure, and in return her family had been given a title. Her father had worked hard to advance his career and become an aristocrat. Fake was surprised by this information, and asked what it had to do with him. Alicia replied that there must always be a blacksmith in her family. One of the family members must have a talent for blacksmithing in their blood. C realized that it was not about blood at all. After all, if innate talent was inherited, she could marry whomever she wanted. Alicia replied that this was exactly what she meant and asked if he would be her fiancé. Fake was confused. Alicia asked him again. After all, there were so many suitors around her and she was tired of their attention. She wanted to get married when she met the man she truly loved. But until then, she wanted MC to pretend to be her fiancé. For her, it was a necessary measure to scare off the others. Besides, if he went to her homeland with her, she would make sure he got a new license, and then no one would be able to torment him anymore. She thought it was a win-win situation for both of them. She asked why he wouldn't accept it. Fake smiled and asked if the blacksmith's talent was the main requirement. Then he said that he lacked talent and therefore could not help. Alicia objected, saying that this was not true. After all, she had seen him at work and always thought that he was the most talented blacksmith in the area. And it wasn't just his talent, but also his diligence and hard work. That was what she liked about him. She looked him in the eyes, took his hands, and asked again if he would be her fiancé. MC thought about how she had always been kind to him, how sweet and responsive she was. He tried to see her in that light and was on the verge of misinterpreting everything. Nick asked her to explain what she thought a fake fiancé would be like. Alicia explained that she thought it would be better than marrying a stranger, and that's why she decided to become Fake's sister-in-law. She asked him not to say things like that anymore because it confused her. MC realized that all he would get from the groom was his word. In reality, Alicia did not want such a relationship with him, but even so, she felt sorry for the man who had nowhere else to go. And that was why she chose him. Even if he was not destined to marry Lady Alicia, he had a chance to find happiness living with her as a blacksmith. He replied that he was ready to become her fiancé. Alicia grabbed him by the shoulders and asked if he was sure. MC replied yes. She explained that in that case, there would be another ball that evening, after which they would go to her residence. Fake clarified that it would be Monday morning. In that case, he would need to resign. He didn't know if he could leave so easily. He had been told that if he resigned, he would have to give 2 weeks' notice. The last time he brought this up, he was severely beaten. But this time he had Alicia, and they would figure something out. Alicia asked him not to call her lady. Fake asked why. She explained that now he was her fiancé and his status didn't matter, so she asked him to address her without titles from now on. MC scratched his head and agreed with this line of thinking. Alicia said that now he was no longer a stranger. Fake went to Mr. Morgan and said that he could no longer work and wanted to resign of his own accord. Morgan shouted, "What are you talking about? Have you forgotten how much effort has been put into you over the years?" One of his colleagues agreed with these words and asked who else, in his opinion, would tolerate such mediocrity. Another said that he had taught him etiquette, since Fake had not known how to behave at court before. Third asked where he would go in that case and who would need him. After all, such a talentless person would not be able to support himself anywhere. MC stood there confused, thinking that before, it would never have occurred to him to object and he would have simply remained silent. but now he had made a promise to Alicia and couldn't give up. He gathered his thoughts. He shouted once more that he wanted to resign because he could no longer cope with the work. Morgan asked what he would do when he left. Did he have another job lined up? Fake said yes. Morgan asked to see his license. MC replied, of course, took out his license and handed it to his boss. Morgan angrily tore the license to shreds. He tore it into small pieces. He said that MC was no longer a blacksmith and would not be able to work in this country. Then he asked where such a useless person would go now. Even if he hoped to get his license back, it was under their jurisdiction, and if he wanted it back, he would have to stay and work for them. Fake thought about how sick he was of this country and what was the point of a license if it meant nothing. Morgan said that if Fake fulfilled his duties for another year, he would get a promotion and he would hire a new person. MC replied that he no longer worked for him and apologized. Morgan was outraged by these words. Shouted that Fake was useless. He reminded him that if he continued to do this illegally, he would be arrested. MC replied that it didn't matter. One of his colleagues said that if Fake left them, he would be completely alone and no one else would put up with a useless person like him. Another said that if Fake realized what he had done, he would crawl back and continue working for them anyway. MC turned around. Hearing his colleagues say that they had practically accepted him into their union, headed for the exit. Fake realized that he never wanted to be here again. He walked out and slammed the door. He turned around and noticed Alicia. She asked if he was done. Fake replied yes. Then he wondered if she had heard the conversation. After all, if there was no soundproofing, she would have heard everything they said to him, and he really didn't want that. Morgan ran out of the office. He noticed Alicia and called out her name. He bowed and said that he hadn't seen her in a long time and complimented her, saying that she was becoming more and more charming every day. Alicia thanked him and asked if Fake had been fired. This question stunned Morgan, and he replied yes. Then he pointed at MC and said that it didn't matter anyway, because they had created the most favorable conditions for him, but he had neglected them and apparently hadn't learned anything. Alicia replied that she was extremely surprised by this fact, because she had given him a job at her residence, and then laughed loudly. Morgan and his former colleagues at Fake were extremely shocked by this information. Morgan asked what she meant. After all, MC couldn't even forge a sword properly, let alone cast spells. Alicia replied that, in her opinion, Fake was a very talented craftsman and asked if anyone had any objections to her taking him. Morgan replied that of course not, and then asked why she didn't choose someone like him. He bowed and asked again why she shouldn't hire him. Alicia laughed and replied that she wasn't interested. Morgan was stunned by the whole situation. Alicia turned around, smiled, and said that she and Fake could leave. They took each other's hands and headed for the palace exit. MC reflected on the fact that he was just a fake fiancé for Alicia, but every day he fell more and more in love with her, and so he and Alicia left the Revand Empire and headed south to the kingdom of Narstaya. Upon arrival, Alicia's father will be waiting for them at the Burnest family estate. Day's journey by stagecoach, and they are there. MC got out of the stagecoach and stretched. Alicia asked if he was tired. After all, it had been a long day. Fake replied that he wasn't tired at all, but even if he were, it would be nothing. After all, he worked without rest from dawn to dusk in the smithy. Alicia said that she had already notified her father and that he was waiting for them. Fake replied that was good and said that he was even a little excited. Took Alicia's hand. She pulled her hand away and cried out. Fake apologized and said that he thought it would be logical to do so. This is how Alicia responded. Then she said that everything was fine and she just didn't expect such a turn of events. Fake smiled and replied that he was truly sorry because he had crossed the line. The engagement would be fake and he had gone too far. Alicia objected. Even though he caught her off guard, there was nothing wrong with that. So she asked him not to worry. Fake asked what she meant. Suggested that everything would look more natural if they improvised. Alicia nodded and replied that it would. They arrived at Mr. Burness' estate. He sat in his royal robes and wondered if this was the blacksmith his daughter had mentioned. Alicia nodded and said that his talent was 1 in a million. She asked her father to watch him cast spells. Goral approached the sword rack and picked up a sword. He handed it to the MC and asked him to show how he enchanted swords. Gave him the task of renewing the spells cast on it. Fake replied that he would. He took the sword out of its sheath. He began to read its code and noticed that there were many magical symbols on it. These spells were incomparable to those he had restored at court. He assumed that the sword must belong to a person of high rank, such as a knight captain. He noticed that skillful inlay and engraving had been used, and he had never seen such exquisite work before. Goral pointed at him and said that Fake had a week. Otherwise, if he couldn't do it, he could leave. Fake said that the work would not take long. Goral asked, what? MC explained that not all of the symbols were corroded, so the task was not difficult for him. Only some of them were damaged, and he just needed to put the correct characters in the gaps. And considering which characters are at the beginning and end, he begins to understand the overall design of the spells. Alicia said that it was not easy to reproduce the spell exactly, but it was quite possible to cast a very similar one. She knew of spells with a similar effect. Fake exhaled and announced that the job was done. Goral asked, what? How did you finish already? Fake handed him the sword. Goral took it out of its sheath. He swung it. He looked at the blade of the sword and said that it turned out well. He put the sword back in its sheath. He said he couldn't have imagined that Fake was so talented. MC thanked him for his kind words. Goral said he wasn't ready to accept him as a future husband for his daughter. Alicia apologized to him. Fake thought Mr. Burnest was quite harsh, but apparently he was wrong. MC bowed and said that he would work tirelessly. Goro replied that he expected nothing less. He entrusted the workshop in the mansion to Fake's complete disposal. He told him that he could use the necessary materials and that he would take care of the supplies. In addition, Mr. Burnest applied for a license and asked him not to lose it again. Fake was surprised and asked if he was now allowed to work freely. Goro replied that of course he was, because he was a blacksmith and had the right to decide where to apply his skills. Previously, he had been allowed to cast spells, but he had always been forced to do so. But now he could work with metal. MC couldn't believe his luck. He thanked Mr. Burnest. Mr. Burnest, in turn, said that some knights in his kingdom might need Fake services. He had already informed his servants. Asked them for more detailed information. At the moment, he had to leave on business for a while. Fake replied, "Yes, sir." Goro looked at him from under his eyebrows and told him not to dare lay a finger on his daughter while he was away. Fake replied, "Of course, sir." MC thanked the gentleman for helping him convince Mr. Burnest. Although he still hasn't fully accepted the situation, Fake will work on it. Alicia said that this was the first time he had praised someone so highly, and that it was a good sign. Fake smiled and replied that it seemed to be so. He thought about how much he owed Alicia and how wonderful it would be if he could repay her kindness even a little. At that moment, a servant approached and said she was pleased to meet him. The girl introduced herself as Leffy and said she would show them around the estate. MC introduced himself in return. Alicia asked Leffy to be so kind as to show the guest around the estate. They set off to explore the mansion. Leffy led him to the blacksmith's workshop, which had been specially prepared for Lady Alicia's fiancé. Fake realized that blacksmith workshops were mostly arranged in the same way. He noticed the forge and said that it was very rare. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen something like it. Usually they only used magic in their work, rarely resorting to such tools. Nevertheless, it was great that he now had the opportunity to use it from time to time. Leffy said that if he needed anything else, he could let her know and she would take care of everything. Fake replied that he had all the materials he needed, thanked her, and said that he didn't need anything else. In that case, Leffy asked permission to show him his room. She bowed and said that this is where he would be living. She repeated that if he needed anything, he could ask her. Fake thanked her for her hospitality and replied that if he needed anything, he would let her know. He sat down on a luxurious sofa. He thought about how his life was starting to get better. Until recently, he had been working in conditions that could have ruined his health at any moment. But now he had a beautiful and kind girl by his side, like his fiancée. And even if the engagement wasn't real, he couldn't have asked for anything better. And most importantly, he was now truly free. He no longer had to worry about work that had to be done by morning, and he would have time to sleep normally. He could take a day off every day if he wanted to. But after thinking about it for a moment, he realized that this was going too far and would not only complicate the engagement, but also significantly damage his reputation. He stared at the ceiling and realized that now he didn't have to do anything. He understood what free time was, but in any case, starting tomorrow, he would resume his duties, and now he would decide for himself how and how much he would work. Before, he couldn't take a step without being beaten. Now he hopes that every day will be just as happy. Alicia fondly remembered the moment when Fake said he would be her fiancé. Leffy approached her and said that MC had settled comfortably into his room. Alicia thanked her for her work. Leffy inquired about the progress of her plan. Alicia replied that everything had gone even better than she had expected. Leffy said she was glad to hear it and asked when she could expect news. Alicia couldn't answer. Leffy said she didn't understand because when she left the residence, the lady said she would ask Fake to be her husband. Alicia exclaimed that she hadn't said that and that it sounded embarrassing. Leffy asked if she had asked him to marry her. Alicia replied that she had tried. Even if it wasn't a real relationship, they had still talked about marriage. It was such a sudden wedding, but she felt calm when she thought about it, and after everything that had happened, she felt a little awkward. Leffy asked if a wedding date had been set. Alicia remained silent. Leffy said that now she understood everything. Alicia had proposed to her fiancé, and that had also been a cover. Alicia said that she had tried and done what she could. Leffy replied that if Fake was even slightly interested, he would understand everything from the lady's behavior. Alicia asked, "What, is it that obvious?" Leffy replied that it was very obvious and suggested that MC knew everything. She said that it wasn't just noticeable. Even obvious. Alicia asked her not to joke like that. After all, she thought she was doing a good job of hiding it, and now she felt even more awkward. Leffy said that even if it was just a cover, Alicia had already made a statement, so they could start wedding preparations as soon as possible. Alicia replied that her father had not yet given his blessing. Leffy said that he needed to prove himself as a blacksmith, and that they had to wait until Master Goro assessed his abilities. Alicia agreed with her because her family had made a name for themselves in blacksmithing. Therefore, she could only marry a very talented person. And as the daughter of a noble family, she loses her freedom to choose love. She had always known that. But what if it was fake? Then she would be able to marry the one she loved, Alicia wondered. Leffy replied that this was true, but she believed it was too early to rejoice. Meanwhile, all the employees gathered in Mr. Morgan's office. He looked at each of them with a heavy gaze. One of the employees asked what Mr. Morgan was going to do. Would he hire someone new? After all, that idiot Fake still hadn't returned, and he was too much of a show-off for an apprentice. Mr. Morgan said that in that case, he would have to cut his salary and monthly bonuses in half. He asked if they needed an apprentice. One of the workers said they didn't need one. Seda said he agreed and asked Morgan for his opinion. Morgan in turn asked Seda what he thought of the Burnest house, to which Lady Alicia belonged. Seda replied that the house was known only for its title. but rumor has it that they sometimes choose the most talented blacksmiths to marry their daughters. Originally, the Burness family were simple blacksmiths. One glance at Fake is enough for them to understand that he is untalented and that obviously no one will want to hire him. Seda tried to give him a couple of orders. Fake couldn't even hold a hammer properly and kept falling over. Morgan asked Seda if he thought Fake would eventually be fired. Seda replied yes because he had simply lost his way, but in the end he would crawl back to them. The only question was how long the Burness would tolerate him before kicking him out. Morgan said it would be a week at most, no more. Someone who has nowhere else to go will eventually come back to them. In that case, he would give him a week's worth of work, plus the week he missed. They would assign everything to Fake again. Great idea, said the workers. This way, everything would be settled for the next 2 weeks, and they wouldn't have to start right away and would have enough time before Fake returned. And he deserved this punishment. Morgan said that first they needed to explain to the knight that they would not be able to start work immediately due to some urgent matters, and he, in turn, would take the sword for now. Morgan laughed and said that Fake would soon realize what a failure he was, and then he would chase him around again like a useless servant, and he would work harder than ever, and let him just try to fail at the work that had piled up during his absence. Morgan eagerly awaited Fake's return and knew that by the time he was kicked out, he would have a fitting punishment ready for him. MC woke up before dawn again, and it had already become a habit. During his service at court, he always rose with the first rays of the sun to complete all his work alone, and sometimes to finish what was left over from the previous day. This was also part of his daily routine of casting spells, new orders and responsibilities beyond those of an ordinary blacksmith, every day from dawn to midnight, over and over again. But now, when he wakes up so early, there is no work yet. It had been quite some time since he had been in the smithy. He got out of bed, stretched, and said, "Let's get started." Fake picked up a crystal in his hand. It was witch ore and it looked great. Witch ore is a special metal that is sensitive to spells. It is indispensable for blacksmithing because only this material can be enchanted. Enchanting it increases the strength of the steel many times over, and most importantly, it is easy to obtain from demons. To extract iron, you have to sit in the mines without leaving. And when one is empty, you have to look for the next one. Get witch ore, you just need to kill a demon. Fake noticed the gloves. He noticed that they were made of demon skin and were quite durable, with the gloves withstanding high temperatures well. After all, blacksmiths use the magic of fire, water, and earth. But first, he would need fire. There are several types of witch ore. The rarest and highest quality is marked with an S grade. It is followed by grades A, B, C, D, E, and F, respectively. Most commonly used are F and E grade ores, which are not of the highest quality. Fake decided that today he would try something simple to warm up. He is not going to create the most powerful weapon in the world, so this crystal will be enough. He decided to make a knife, and now the ore was red hot, and it was time to send it to the casting mold. After that, the temperature is raised even higher. In the old days, blacksmiths hardened metal in a fire pit. But today, this technology is considered obsolete. This makes the material malleable and soft. He creates a clay mold with the magic of the earth and pours metal into it. Then the mold is cooled with water magic. A steel ingot is extracted from it. He softens it slightly by heating it and then shapes it as desired. Fake hammered the metal on an anvil and realized that this sound was incomparable to anything else. After all, it is necessary to listen to the sound and cool and heat the steel several times. This improves the quality. As the quality of the metal increases, so does its purity and magical potential. But today he didn't have enough time for the knife, so he decided that next time he would prepare the materials in advance because there was so much he wanted to do. And so, after shaping the metal, he examined the knife and realized that it was exactly what he had planned. Now it was time to work with clay. This will cool the blade area and increase its strength, as well as enhance the magical potential of the material. For starting to grind, it is important to distribute the magic evenly over the surface. Prepare some cold water, and immediately a pattern appears in the cutting edge area. Then, using wind magic, he sharpens the blade, and now that the surface is smooth and shiny, all that remains is to cast a spell. After casting the spell, the knife is ready, and MC decides to try it out. He makes a small brick out of clay and cuts it in half with a light movement. Examining the knife, he realizes that the sharpness and weight are just right. Wrapping the handle with cloth, he remembers that he hasn't done this in a long time, and now he has spent 3 whole hours on it. Fake realized that it was time for breakfast, and he had completely forgotten. Previously, due to the amount of work he only had time for rare snacks right in the forge. Turning around, he noticed Alicia. Fake was surprised and asked how long she had been standing there. Alicia laughed and replied that it had been about an hour. Leffy told her that he was working in the workshop today, so she came. That long. Fake was surprised, he hadn't even noticed. Alicia smiled and replied that he was very focused. MC looked at her chest with an embarrassed look. Alicia asked him not to look at her like that because it made her uncomfortable. Fake covered his face with his hands and apologized. He thought that he had messed up again because she was right. He shouldn't look at her like that. Fake apologized again and said she just looked cute. Alicia asked, "Cute?" and then replied that everything was fine. After all, she was his fiancée and there was nothing wrong with looking at her at the right moment. Right, she asked. Fake thought about it. The right moment. He told himself not to overthink things. He wasn't her real fiancé and she was just pretending not to notice who was staring at her. He continued to stand there, burning with shame. And he said that she had come all this way to see him work, and he hadn't even noticed her presence, and he apologized for that. Alicia asked him not to worry about it because he had worked so hard on that knife, and she was happy to watch. Fake looked at her smile and thought it was something special, her smile shining brighter than the sun. Alicia asked permission to look at the knife. Fake said sure. Alicia took the knife in her hands. She examined it and said that it was very beautiful, and that it was hard to believe that only E-class ore had been used to make it. The blade was so sharp and exquisitely enchanted that she found it hard to believe that it was only E-class. MC asked if it was true and thanked her for her warm feedback, because he had tried to make something good. If he had had a little more time, he would have made it even better, and if he had known that Alicia would be looking, he would have put in even more effort. Alicia made a flourish with her knife. Fake was surprised that she knew how to handle a blade. Alicia said that she had been taught the basics of fencing, just a little for self-defense. She tossed the knife and then caught it. She made another swing. Fake watched and realized that she was very good at it. Alicia continued to demonstrate her skill with the blade. She stopped and asked if she had done something wrong. Fake asked what she meant. Alicia replied that he had just looked at her strangely. Fake laughed and thought, "Here we go again." He was staring at her again. He told her that he was just a little distracted and that she looked beautiful. Alicia asked, "Beautiful, and that's all?" MC replied that it was truly strikingly beautiful. She took him by the sleeve and asked him to repeat it while looking her in the eyes. Fake looked at her and said again that it was strikingly beautiful. Alicia thanked him. Fake thought about how, even though this engagement wasn't real, Alicia was so convincing in maintaining the appearance of a relationship with him, and it looked quite sincere. At moments like this, he couldn't help wondering if he really did care about her. Although, come to think of it, surely almost any girl could pretend convincingly, at least that's what he had heard. Alicia smiled and invited him to come with her as breakfast was ready. Fake said yes, of course. First, he said he needed to take a shower to do his business. And then, at the table, Alicia asked him if he had always been so good at casting spells. Fake replied, of course not. But the work always had to be done quickly and efficiently, and he had a lot of responsibility, so over time he got the hang of it. Thanks to those hellish days, he can now cast spells quickly and efficiently. He wondered why the time he spent with her warmed his heart so much. Fake thanked Leffy for breakfast. MC remembered that when he was walking to the smithy, he smelled bread. He asked if they always baked it in the morning. He took a bite of a French roll. The bread was warm, soft, fragrant, and delicious, incredibly delicious. Tears began to roll down his cheeks. Alicia asked what was wrong. She was surprised that he was crying. She asked again what was wrong. Fake apologized. He couldn't even remember the last time he had seen such treats. Alicia replied that she understood and asked him to tell her more about his past. MC said that he usually worked late into the night, so he often didn't have time to eat a bite during the day, and if he did manage to find time for lunch, he ate while working. He didn't have time to savor the taste of food, only to swallow it while he had the chance. But now, as he shared a meal with her, for him, it's the best breakfast ever, so it's just tears of happiness. Alicia responded well. Then she said he could take his time and just enjoy it. Fake thanked her. And they took a carriage to the city so Alicia could show him around. She asked if he enjoyed his breakfast. Fake replied that it was delicious. When they reached the city, Alicia covered herself with a cloak. She asked if her face was well covered. Fake replied yes. Then he asked why she was being so secretive. Alicia explained that she didn't socialize in the city, but many people introduced themselves to her father at festivals, so someone might recognize her face. MC remembered what Leffy had said. People in the city were jealous of Alicia because of her beauty, and if they recognized her, they wouldn't be able to enjoy a peaceful walk. Alicia smiled and said that their walk was like a date. Fake replied that it really did feel like a date, but he didn't understand why it was such a big deal. Alicia was upset by these words. MC explained his words by saying that he wasn't her real fiancé, so he didn't understand why she was putting so much effort into a date with him. He also thought that if he succeeded as a blacksmith and earned her father's approval, that would be enough. After all, she didn't want to marry some stranger, so she got engaged to him for appearance's sake, and he was just a cover, so there was no need for her to pretend they were on a date. Leffy interrupted their conversation, saying that Mr. Goral wanted Alicia to marry a talented blacksmith and was trying to contribute to her happiness in his own way. He also wanted to make sure that Alicia would marry for love. That's why he wasn't rushing her into marriage. Alicia was surprised by Leffy's appearance. She confirmed everything Leffy said. She said that this date was also very important to her, so she asked Leffy not to worry about anything. Fake replied that she wouldn't. Leffy asked permission to take her leave and wished them a wonderful time. MC was surprised that Leffy had been nearby all this time. He hadn't noticed her presence at all, although he hadn't expected anything less from an accompanying servant. He realized that Leffy knew about the nature of their relationship, and it made him feel a little better that someone else knew about it. Alicia turned to him and asked to return to the conversation about how to influence her father's opinion. She asked to take his hand. Fake asked if they needed to walk hand in hand, and if that would influence Mr. Goral's opinion. Alicia replied that it was true, because you never know when you might run into one of his knights. MC thought about how he had held her hand before, but now they were on a date, and he was a little more nervous than usual. Her hand felt warmer than last time. He thought that now she might see him as a man. They continued their walk. Fake said with a satisfied look on his face that he couldn't remember the last time he had walked so calmly through the city. Alicia replied that from now on, he no longer needed to rush anywhere. Fake said that even though he no longer needed to exhaust himself with work, he would still make every effort to improve his skills, and if things continued like this, perhaps Mr. Goral would accept him. Alicia asked him to promise that he would not do anything rash. Fake agreed. Meanwhile, all the swords in Mr. Morgan's smithy lay idle. Morgan was surprised that Fake had left them more than a week ago, but had not yet returned. He asked if this incompetent individual had no sense of professional duty whatsoever. One of the employees advised him to be patient. After all, the Burnest residence is quite far from the capital, and he believes that if Fake is dismissed, he will have to walk there. Morgan replied that this was a predictable outcome for a good-for-nothing like him. After all, they were the only ones he could rely on for mercy. He no longer even has a blacksmith's license, and without documents he will not be able to work, so he has no choice but to go to court for new ID. He clenched his fist and declared that the conditions for his return were simple. No pay for the first 2 months, then only a pittance. There was a knock at the door. Morgan thought it was fake, but it was the captain who entered the door. He said they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Morgan asked how he could be of service. The captain said he had an order for spells. He put his sword on the table. Morgan asked if he would be a suitable candidate. Morgan thought about the fact that he was accepting an order from the holder of the highest knightly title in the country, and despite the fact that he had his own blacksmith, whose genius was undeniable, he still came to ask him. One of the workers asked what had brought such a distinguished person to them. Morgan said that the order would be accepted immediately. Captain asked him to wait and find out something first. He wanted to speak to the person who had enchanted the sword. Morgan replied that the sword belonged to a common knight and had been worked on by their apprentice named Fake. Morgan thought that the captain had come to complain about the MC's mediocre work, but the captain examined the sword and said that it was a blessing for their current knights. Morgan asked what he meant. The captain said that when he was a simple knight, swords they were given were barely enchanted and were practically no different from ordinary ones. Morgan remembered that in those days, he didn't really cast spells, as there was no opportunity to do so, and Fake was far from being a decent spellcaster. His spells were always so ridiculous that even with maximum effort, he would have surpassed his work many times over. But the captain was clearly saying something strange. The swords he remembered from those days were like trash. And the captain said that a blacksmith who could enchant a sword so well, even for a simple knight, deserved praise, and he would like to entrust Fake with his own sword. Morgan didn't understand what kind of nonsense this man was talking about. The captain asked if he had not made himself clear. He wanted Fake to cast the spell, and he asked where to find him. Morgan asked in annoyance why Fake specifically. Captain explained that he himself did not have the ability to read magical writings, but his blacksmith said that the work done on this blade was excellent, and he had come to them to meet this master. But he did not understand where he was. Morgan replied that MC wasn't very talented, so he let him go for a while. The captain asked again, "What, not talented? How do you mean?" Morgan replied that Fake may have managed to cast some decent spells once, but that was more of an exception, just luck. After all, he casts dozens, even hundreds of spells a week, and a couple of them may have turned out decent. But he has absolutely no potential and will never become a master, no matter how much effort he puts in. The captain practically agreed with this, but he still wanted Fake to be assigned the job and said that he would leave the sword with them for now. Morgan asked if he could cast the spells. After all, he was the head of the workshop and could certainly handle the task much better than a regular apprentice. The captain replied that since Fake was on vacation, he would be back soon. He had time and could wait until then. He asked him to convey his regards. He said he would eagerly await the results of his work. Morgan replied angrily that he understood. He was annoyed that the captain kept mentioning the boy's name. The captain headed for the exit and said that he was counting on them and asked to tell one of his knights when the work was finished. Morgan didn't understand what nonsense the captain was talking about. After all, he said he couldn't even see the magic code, and if even his work as an MC brings him such delight, what would he say about his work? After all, against the backdrop of Fake, his spells would go down in history. Seda asked Morgan what he was going to do. Morgan said he was going to seize his chance as it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Seda asked what he meant. Morgan smiled and replied that he would cast the spell himself. Seda was surprised and wondered if that was acceptable. Morgan replied that since even Fake's spell had impressed the captain, his spell would surely exceed all expectations, and when that happened, he would be able to become the captain's personal blacksmith. The other workers were confused. One of them wondered if their boss's reaction was too presumptuous. Another agreed with him and asked if the order wasn't addressed to the entire blacksmith's workshop. Said that anyone could do it better than Fake. After all, the spells were so weak that they were barely noticeable. Morgan declared that he would not miss this opportunity and that the profit would be his and he would take this job for himself. By becoming the captain's personal blacksmith, he would write his name in the history of blacksmithing. As the fifth son in a count's family, he didn't have many prospects and never thought he would get a chance like this. Now he is the head of the court smithy and his next goal. Opportunities are clearly in the air, Morgan surmised, and he seized one of them. He set to work with the sword, to be continued. Thanks for watching. Leave your feedback in the comments. If you enjoyed the story, like and subscribe. See you soon.